group around weights and determining weights and scales and re-ratings and minimum weight increases to cater for rider welfare. We've also got the racing group looking at stake money breakdowns. An NZTR board and with our stakeholder groups will provide further guidance on that once we get an understanding from RETA on our funding levels. And the possibility of free racing, it's a question that we often get asked, and that's one of those things that the NZTR are supportive of, and we'll have more information on that as we go forward over the next couple of weeks. But there's lots of people that have contributed to these discussions, which include our programming chairs, our trainers, other racing managers, and our handicappers. So a big shout out to all those people. Thank you. We're all working in trying times, but it's a great opportunity to relaunch the industry on the 3rd of July and an opportunity to showcase racing across New Zealand and into Australia. And those further information on all that will be coming in the days and the weeks ahead. We need to finalise, and now let's just go to a few questions, because some really good questions have come through in the last little while, and we've got one from Daryl and Sarah. Both have asked if NZ racing has returned to normal by November, is there freedom for the movement or travel and no restrictions on large groups? Will the 1,000, 2,000 guineas be run at Riccarton, and if not, why not? Well, to answer that question, Daryl and Sarah, we have been in discussions, as most people are aware. There's been lots of publicity about it. The NZTR board took a decision on the information that had in front of it at the moment, given the travel restrictions and the closed racing nature of what we were dealing with. We said that a proposal that we would run the 1,000, 2,000 guineas on the North Island. Now that's a decision and a position the NZTR board took for now, but we have said to the Riccarton Club and the CJC that we would review that position in July, and we'll review that in terms of what alert levels the government has in place across the country. As you know, those things are changing. We've seen announcement this week we're moving off level 4 into level 3 next week, and there's lots of information and businesses wanting to start up. We're going to monitor that and make that final decision. It is only a proposal at the moment, and we'll make that final decision on the 1st of July. The other question that Daryl and Sarah have both asked is, given that we're moving to level 3 next week, what does that mean for training, and when will that resume? Well, with RETA and the 3 codes, we've all developed protocols on return to racing. We've liaised and consulted with our clubs and some of our stakeholder groups, and those protocols are now being, for what have been a word, processed with government. We've got a number of government entities that we need to seek approval from, and ultimately it's the Prime Minister's office that will make the final decision. And WorkSafe are now have our protocols at the moment. We got another email this morning to say they're just looking for a bit more information. So hopefully in the next 24, 48 hours we'll be able to provide some further information on returning to training. I'm optimistic that we can, and it's really important that we get those public training tracks open, and our people, our trainers, our jockeys, our stable hands and track riders back to work. We've got to remember they are workplaces. They will be closed events, and we've got the right protocols in place to keep everyone safe, including the biosecurity measures and keeping the standard 1 and 2 metre distancing, which is really important. Another good question from Lance and Laurie and Paul, all asking a variation on when will we know what stakes we'll be racing for. Well, let me rest assured that between RETA and the codes, we're working hard, getting some numbers out from RETA, and hopefully over the next couple of weeks, well, not hopefully, we will be over the next couple of weeks be able to provide some direction on the stakes matrix and our funding for clubs. Importantly, our clubs are an important part of the ecosystem of racing, and when we come back, we'll need all the industry working together. That's clubs and all our stakeholder groups with RETA to push for the resurgence of racing. And we're very fortunate in this country. Racing's got a fantastic reputation and a breeding reputation that is internationally recognised, and we need to make sure that those mantles are enhanced and developed. Another good question from Gail. NZTR stated harness racing can restart a month earlier than galloping. Please explain why this is. And Gail goes on to say, many trainers of gallopers have been able to keep horses in light work throughout the lockdown. In fact, it has usually been for horse welfare. This has resulted in those horses only requiring a month's fast work. So, Gail, it's a really good question. In the research we did just at the start of the lockdown, we found that there was about 20% of horses across the country that the trainers were keeping in what we call light work, and the other 80% were turned out to adjustment farms and pre-trainers. So what we said we'd do, we always said the targeted date for return to racing is the 3rd of July, and what we'll look to do is once we get back into training, the team at NZTR will do another ring around to the trainers, get a bit of a feel for the number of horses in work, and then between the NZTR board and the management, we'll look at those numbers and determine whether we can add any races or start earlier. But at this point, we've put a peg in the ground. 3rd of July is our starting point. We've put a draft program out there for 3rd of July through the middle of November, and that's what we're targeting to achieve with a stakes matrix once we get some advice from Rita. Another good question from Casey, Joel and Natalie. They've asked, when will we have a program for trials leading into racing commencing again? Where with our groups that we're working with across the country, we'll have a clearer indication on that by the middle of next week, Casey, Joel and Natalie. But really good question. It's a general question that lots of our participants have been asking. Now from Casey, lots of good questions from Casey. Is there any chance of a better point system for trialers? 4 for a win, 2 for a second and 1 for a third, or something similar? And that question goes on, making it easy for lower rated horses to gain starts in races rather than having to trial multiple times to get a win, to get points so that horses can get into races. The principle in this startup phase is we want horses to race as opposed to trial, and we'll be attempting to give as many horses the opportunity to start as we can, possibly by scheduling some open entry races, notwithstanding the limited race dates that will exist when we start up. Casey goes on, she'd also like to ask a couple of other questions. Are there going to be capped nominations per trainer? No, there won't be, Casey. With big stables stating that they'll be ready to go by July, what happens if they enter 5 or 6 runners per race and 3 or 4 trainers nominate that amount? So does that force many horses out of races? We'll have a look at all that on adding additional races at a meeting if possible and when required. So that'll be a watch and see. Is it possible to be like Australia when it comes to nominations fees to be scrapped for good, and say if a fee that was paid when scratched? This is a definite consideration. We are looking at removing fees except for black type races, and that'll be determined once we get a handle on funding. Casey and Natalie, another good question. What are the weights the horse is going to be set as back to normal, or the 2 kg be added to the weight applying? We're working through that, and we'll have something on that next week. Tony, good question from Tony. Why has there not been a generic email sent to every trainer, big and small, to see what horses they would have available to race on the 1st of July, the ratings of those horses, and the distances they would want to run those horses? The trainers, Tony, the trainers we have canvassed were phoned, and this allowed us to talk to them about the horses they'd like to have, or they think they'll have available in July and later. Rest assured, Tony, there'll be a range of distances available, and NZTR will make up fields with consultation with programming chairman. And just to re-emphasise that, we don't make all the decisions in Wellington. We do seek advice from programming chairs and programming groups right up and down the country, whether that's the north area, the central districts, and through south. We get good input from trainer groups, club groups, into the structure of our programming. So rest assured, we'll be doing the very best we can to make races available for the horses that come back into work and want to race from the 3rd of July. Diane's got a really good question, a really good biosecurity question. Will jockeys wear their own colours when we come back to race on the 3rd of July? The protocols that we've drafted that are currently before government have stated that a rider should wear each set of colours once, and NZTR will provide additional colours when this does happen. And they've been ordered, and we're just waiting on the delivery of those. Chris, good question from Chris. It's a really it's opening our eyes and saying, how do we work differently? Why wouldn't NZ Racing consider a merge into Australian Racing Admin and Resource Pool to share content production programming initiatives? Well, the NZTR board in the background has been progressing work with Racing Australia, and how do we work together on sharing IT platforms? How do we work together on horse welfare programs, and how do we work together on a common set of rules between the two countries? So it's a really good question, Chris. It's something that, yes, will evolve, and we need to do it. We are very similar in terms of racing, horses, jockeys, trainers, racetracks. Our stewards all do similar things across the Tasman. So the more we can get aligned and the more we get common business process, the more cost effective it can be for our participants and clearer for our customers, which, at the end of the day, owners and punters fund our business, and the easier we can make it for our customers, the better. So it's a really good question, Chris. Question from Joel. When will we be racing at Trentham and the Wairarapa again? While we've got the alert levels in place we have, we'll take guidance on that over the coming months, but I would expect over the December-January period. We know Trentham and the Wairarapa run fantastic race meetings in December and January, and Waitangi Day in the Wairarapa. We'll just have to wait and see. I love going to those race meetings. There's nothing better than getting thousands of people getting out and enjoying their thoroughbred racing. We want that to happen in droves, and we know that people in New Zealand have been starved for sport, and we want to be front and centre when we come back and allowing people on track. Unfortunately, we'll be able to continue to race once we get that approval from government. It'll be closed-door racing initially, but at some point later this year, we hope that can all open up. Lance has asked, good question from Lance, have you had discussions with all the marketing and PR staff of Love Racing to stand down during this period? Well, Love Racing's been a customer brand that was launched a couple of years ago, and over the last 3 or 4 months we have reduced our resources into Love Racing by about 40%, so that's important. And the reason I can get on today and take feedback from the participants and upload content to our website, we do have 75,000 people that come and engage in the Love Racing website, and we've got our racing desk that does a great job. We've got 3 staff that do a terrific job in providing content. We believe that's important to get messages out to the industry, albeit we're in a lull at the moment, but pushing information out to customers is really important. And once we get back racing, we've got 75,000 people that are engaging with that platform, and we want more people. And it's important as less information disappears from mainstream media. We're seeing lots of actions across New Zealand where racing editors and racing writers and journalists are becoming made redundant. So the sport took a position to have a voice through a platform that is growing on a weekly and monthly basis. But all good questions, Lance. Another question from Lance, have we thought about relocating all of NZTR to a racing industry property to reduce costs? It's something the board has thought about. We're in a leasing arrangement in Wellington, down in Petone there. But Wellington, I suppose, is a bit of a neutral spot. We've got to remember that NZTR represents the interests of all clubs and all participants across the North and South Island, and that's why it's important that we've had that office there. But who knows? We need to be innovative as we come out of COVID-19. We've always maintained in our venue plan that we want aspirational venues, we want new venues, we want clubs to work together in regions, we want the silos reduced, and if that means that we've got to do things differently in NZTR, we're not shy in coming to terms with what that may look like. So very much an open mind on that. Will you start with a clean sheet of paper and draw up a racing calendar that aligns with what the racing needs are today? Well, another good question, that, and the NZTR board over the last 3 weeks have worked on developing up a series of work streams. about how do we drive participation in the business, how do we get the footprint right, what are the right program of races to develop wagering turnover that ultimately grows the revenue for the industry. All really good questions, and over the coming months, the work that the NZTR board are doing in their work streams, we'll consult the industry later this year on what a future reshaping of New Zealand thoroughbred racing can look for. Good question from Shane and Laurie. Both have questions regarding the performance of Rita. Shane and Laurie, I'm not going to get involved in the politics of racing. The reality is our focus at the moment is solely on getting thoroughbred racing up and going. We're in a pandemic, we're in unprecedented times, and we're putting all our energy into getting racing up and going. We have to work with Rita, we've got to work with the other two codes, we've got to work with our stakeholder groups to drive outcomes that get racing back up and going. So that's the board's focus, that's the stakeholder focus, and that's certainly the team at NZTR's focus now and right through this really difficult period for everybody. But I've got to say I'm really proud of the way the industry has followed the government's rules, stayed in your bubble, and that's one of the reasons we can come from level 4 into level 3. Question from Shane. When racing behind closed doors on non-industry days, how will clubs be funded with on-course turnover? Well, there won't be, under closed door racing, there'll be no on-course turnover, Shane. But if I know it's the Shane that's asked that question, it is a question that across the country, once we're back up with people coming on racetracks, we need to find a way for a more efficient revenue return to the clubs. We've got silos of businesses across the country. We've got clubs that clearly are going to struggle through this period. We're struggling prior to COVID, and now we'll struggle again. So we need to find a new operating model for clubs, and we can't have silos of little businesses trying to administer the sport. So it's time to open our minds to what a different approach for racing could look like when we come out of the new. I don't like using the word new normal. What does the reshaping and the revitalisation of racing look like in 6 to 12 months' time? Laurie, your question. My wife and I are thinking of buying another broodmare next month. Can you tell me something positive that will give us the confidence to still go ahead and bid? Because in the past, all we've heard is broken promises, like stake money going up years ago to 20k that has never eventuated. In answer to that, Laurie, the industry has had to overcome significant challenge, especially lately. The board and us remain confident that we'll be able to return to racing in July, and very clearly the Masara review gave us a framework of which the NZTR board is supportive of. That has led to a racing reform bill that's currently sitting in government. We're absolutely supportive of that work, and hopefully over the next couple of months, the outcome of that work will deliver a step change for the industry longer term. But keen for that to happen. But clearly government have got priorities in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic we have on our doorstep at the moment, and I think they're doing a good job to get the country back on its feet. It's always a balance between the economic channels and the challenges and the welfare and safety of all our people, and racing's not immune from any of that, and we've got to do our best when we come out of level 3 to get our participants back up and running. We are a business that has 17,000 full-time jobs across the 3 codes, more than 50,000 people that directly or indirectly benefit from the conduct of racing right across the country, and we've got $1.6 billion worth of economic impact. The government certainly understand the importance of racing, and it's credit to the people that are watching this Facebook Live, and it's credit to the 15,000 owners and the couple of hundred jockeys and the 800 trainers that put their nose to the grindstone and put the show on a daily basis. So, Laurie, we want you to stay on board, mate. You're an important part of the business. Stick with us. We're going to come out the other side a bigger and better business. They're all the questions that came to us before 10 o'clock last night. Now, a question here from Paul. Would you consider a third racing channel? Clearly, that's something that we should consider. A third channel. We just got to make sure that we distribute our racing product in a cost-effective way. What we have to remember, the 50% of the population are now watching, like we're doing today, watching vision on handheld devices and on digital, and that is the way of the future. And I think as a business, we need to embrace that more, both now and into the future. Ricky Rhodes, will minimum stake still be 10,000 as per quoted a couple of weeks ago? Ricky, that's our intention, but it'll be subject to getting guidance on funding from Rita over the next couple of weeks. We have in our programs, we've looked at running less races at less venues. We have to come back, we have to ramp up, but we do want to try and maintain that minimum stake. What level has NZTR paid wages to within the subsidy? From Kirsty. Kirsty, we've across the business, we've reduced our payroll cost by 20%. The CEO's taken a 25% salary cut, and the board directors have taken a 100% cut in their salary. So rest assured, we understand the pain the industry's going through, and NZTR is doing exactly the same. Listen, I've had some really good interaction. Shane McAllister, is it possible under level 2 for owners to watch their horses of their race? Shane, let's like everything, the protocols and the information we're getting out of the government changes on a regular basis. We'd like nothing more than for owners to see their horses racing, and we'll work with the government to see what we can and can't do over the coming months in relation to getting people back on track. Our first priority is making sure that stipulating to government that we do want to run racing behind closed doors. It is a workplace for trainers and jockeys and the RIU, and the quicker we can get back, the better. Listen, I think we've been on the phone now, or on for a little while. Really appreciate you making the time, and based on the feedback we get from you over the next couple of weeks, we'll look to do this every couple of weeks, as I find this is really useful when we get feedback from customers and our trainers and our jockeys. We're in difficult times, but we know as an industry, racing's been resilient over more than 150 years, and I know out of this that if we all work together, we'll come out of it a better industry. But it's going to need everyone to think differently, clubs and participants, and how we build out a new wagering model, how we build out a new model for clubs, how we look after our owners, and how we put on a really good show for our punters, because our punters do, in addition with our owners, provide funding for this industry. Good luck. Thank you for joining, and there's lots more coming through. What about jumps racing from Blair? Yes, Blair, jumps racing. We've put a program. If you go to loveracing.nz, you'll see a link to a jumps racing program for July that'll restart on the North Island. We won't be having jumps racing on the South Island for this season. We will on the North Island as we ramp up to the new racing program. Thank you. Good luck. Appreciate you watching, and we'll talk to you soon. Cheers.